we were talking a bit about, I think we were talking about clarity, awareness, these kind of thing, and I really like these kind of topic because I feel like right now as we live in this generation, there's so many chaotic things happening. You mentioned about you train leaders. Can you talk a little bit about yourself about that?
Yeah, so training leaders is a lot of fun, because I think what we don't notice is that we can all be leaders. We're all leaders in our own way, and at other times we're victims. We don't take responsibility, let things happen to us. So really anyone can be a leader. And there's certain qualities to being a leader that we teach in our training. And I went through this training program as well. It's called Accomplishment Coaching. It's a coach and leader training program. And what they really teach you about life is how to be more at cause, how to be more responsible, rather than being a victim at effect and then feeling like you have no control over your circumstances. And through that leadership training, I developed as a coach, and I think even a lot of people could benefit from this type of program or just leadership training in general, because we all live in an era where the education system is not really teaching us to be leaders. They're teaching us to study, memorize these things. They're not teaching us the life skills that we need to thrive. And I think often people get into leadership positions, but they have no idea what they're doing, and they don't have the support that they need. And then their bosses are too busy to coach them or manage them or train them to be leaders. And then, people in higher positions with power, a lot of the times, if you don't keep yourself in check and if you're not honest with yourself, we're driven by ego, which I think is something that we're seeing a lot of in our society.
In your atmosphere where you work, how do you work with these leaders? Who are these leaders you work with?
The leaders that I work with are usually entrepreneurs. They might be like C-level founders, people that have their own businesses. And when you have your own business, you really have to take the lead, because you have to be responsible for every aspect, as you know, of the bottom line. And you have to take all the responsibility to make sure the business succeeds. And oftentimes we think that leadership, like a lot of people can know who a good leader is, but they don't actually know what the good qualities of the leader are. So they try to emulate being a good leader, but they actually don't think about the more granular level of what are the qualities that make a good leader. And for me, what I think makes a good leader are qualities such as being able to point out problems and then subsequently finding solutions. Being a good leader means you take the responsibility of your people and make sure they're growing and developing to be the best version of themselves. Being a good leader means that you are, creating the atmosphere for people to feel safe and for people to be able to take a risk. So those are the things that sometimes I feel like are missing in the bigger leadership, like the country leadership. I think they're very centered on what they want rather than what's best for the whole country.
But how come leaders like that who think of themselves reach to the top?
Yeah, that's a good question.
How does it happen? I mean, you are responsible for so many people, especially a lot of children, and they have their own children as well. And certain leaders make a decision to create chaos. It impacts a lot of children in the other country as well. But in overall, this person is still on the top.
Yeah, so, by taking lots of action, you can get to the top. It doesn't mean that you'll be a necessarily good leader. A good leader is someone that will follow you, and these people probably do have some type of good leadership skills. Or maybe they're master manipulators, they're artists, they're con artists, and not all of them, but these are types of traits also that people tend to follow, and it's not like a great way to follow or a great person to follow. But anyone can get to the top if they just work really, really hard. If you put in 12-hour days, you're going to get far more ahead than a person that works 8 hours or 6-hour days. So a lot of people that get to the top just work really hard. Now, if they're coming from their true authentic selves, those are typically the people that you'll find in leadership that a lot of people want to follow and are inspired by. People that are on top that, have a lot of people that don't like them or have a lot of polarity. Those are people that may not be as inspiring, and they might have just gotten there because of ego or because of power dynamics and, corruption.
So that comes to my mind that when I was little, I grew up in India, and on TV there's always TV shows and stuff, and the leaders is like that's the time when there was no internet. And I mean there is internet. I don't think it has been widely used at that time in India, and I would see a person standing. There's some kind of stage built by the next to the tree, and that person stand over there and he talks about certain things and people are listening. So that's the era that I've seen. But now if you look into that, we're watching the TV, internet, on the cell phone, the leaders, and it's bombarded with information. So I wanted to ask you about where we are today in this era about leadership.
Yeah, leadership is ever evolving in this era, I think. We're becoming more and more aware that there's been this veil with power, and that we've been, with the media, I don't know if you believe this, but I believe the media is very much driven by the agenda of these people that are, in the hierarchy. So I think leadership is changing a lot. Like one of the people that I really look up to is Elon Musk. And I think he is an incredibly driven person who has a really passionate purpose behind it. And he's living from like that true, authentic place. And you know that because he chooses things that are very challenging and very difficult, but he's also very skilled at it. So he's using his maximum skill level to do the maximum good. And I think that is that's kind of the direction that a lot of leadership is actually going. And with any type of change, it's going to be a little bit rocky. Any type of change that you go through personally in your life, it's going to be challenging to change. That's why people resist change. But the direction that it's going in, I feel like people are more moving to a more authentic style of leadership. It's just going to take a lot of messiness to get there. I think the other type of leadership that has happened too is just managing control and using power to exert over people and suppressing certain numbers of people, divide and conquer. And that's a type of leadership that may have worked well in the past, but I don't see that working so great now. And as we see, all the things that are kind of happening in the world, it's moving more towards as much as we don't always see it, I think it's moving more towards unity.
The scale of work that he's able to make it happen is incredible, I think. But with the time when Industrial Revolution happened and technology began to come, but we say that technology can help us to move forward. It does help us to move forward. But if you look at right now in the world, there's so much technology. And with the technology, we are able to produce so many materials. And now these materials are becoming a problem for us. So how can we tackle these problems? And how are the leaders able to see from the far side, this is where it's going to go, or they just don't care and they just go forward? Because right now, if you look at Amazon is so big, and small businesses are being hurt by the Amazon.
Yeah, I think it's a really challenging problem. That's a great question that I think we're going to have to figure out in our generation. We've been moving towards a quicker, faster, instant gratification. How do we get things to our apartment in a day? It used to be 2 days, and now I see commercials for 1 day, and it's insane. But we're eventually going to have to deal with these issues of this waste and this over packaging of things, and I think that we're going to need more people to step up into leadership roles to fix these and come up with solutions. I think we all have a very innate gift, each of us within us, and I think the biggest waste that we have right now is people's potential. I think we all have something to contribute to the world, and we're not always using that gift, whether it's because maybe we're in poverty and we can't, we have to go work and we can't actually think about these gifts, or whether it's just we're so comfortable at our day job that we don't even want to think about doing something else. But I think each of us as individuals need to step up to be able to start to move towards reaching our full potential, because we each have a gift and we need to contribute to the whole. So it's a challenging issue that we're kind of facing, and we're at a weird crossroads also, because now we're filled with resources. We're at a good place where we're not having to, we don't need to go hunting for our food. We're pretty well got our basic needs met, And now is an opportunity for us to each start cultivating our talents and unite so that we can, make sure our home is taken care of, which is the planet.
You mentioned about there are a lot of challenges and we need to step up. So what are there any platform or anything that people are able to create leadership training or stuff like that?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of platforms that, YouTube is amazing. Like, I love listening to podcasts. Like on the way here, I was listening to Marie Forleo. She has a book called Everything is Figure Outable. Lewis Howes. It's just like about us taking time to actually spend time on ourselves to develop our leadership. I think a lot more people would rather like entertain themselves and maybe, watch. There was like some statistic that I was listening to that people watch like net TV for 5 hours. And that's totally fine, it's fine to be entertained, but like what if you just spent 1 hour reading a book to develop your leadership skill or to develop yourself? To have a better relationship with yourself, to have more self-compassion. I think part of why there's so much turmoil on the outside is because there's also so much turmoil on the inside. And what makes a good leader is someone who is confident in their ability, who can stand in the face of challenges and be able to face it rather than run away. I think because instant gratification is such a big thing, we also deviate from facing the challenging thing. So in order to get like that short-term gratification, like, oh, I don't need to deal with this problem right now. But in the long term, like we actually are self-detrimenting ourselves. Short-term and long-term happiness are very, very different. And I think everyone can step into leadership by making a choice. Like, hey, I want to become more of a leader in my family unit. Like, I notice my family is kind of falling apart. Like, each person can take responsibility in their own way. Like, oh, maybe I need to like help my parents, get their marriage back together. Or, my family members are fighting. What can I do to support them to get back together?
In Tenderloin, and there are a lot of families unable to support themselves to live in the city. We met with the family. They live in a single room occupancy, and they have 3 children, and they live in basically in a one room kind of size like this. There's bunk bed and Tenderloin how it is. You go outside, it's like crazy. The point of my question is like, how can you build a leadership in a small family that's like low income and everything is expensive around you? How can you do it?
Yeah, I think, in leadership in that sense is just really taking on as much responsibility as each person can to make the best of the situation. Leadership is not about like, oh, okay, now I'm going to make my family rich. It's often just about like what each individual person can contribute to make the bigger better, like the whole family unit better. So in that situation, it's like, how can the kids help support the parents? How can they help, simple things like cleaning up the house? How can they take responsibility, and maybe the younger kids need to start getting a job? It's really just about like, how do you take leadership so that the whole unit can be better? And this happens often, for generations now. Women have been the housekeepers, and I think sometimes we forget how important of a role that is to have like a mother that's taking care of the house. The father's doing, the breadwinner, but the woman is taking care of every other aspect to make sure the guy can take care of, do his job, make the money. The mother's taking care of the kids, and in that sense, she is the leader because she's doing what's best for the entire household. So leadership can look like many different ways, in family. And something that's really interesting in family, as we were talking, I was thinking about this, is we take on a lot from our parents that they learned. So it's like a generational leadership thing, and it's passed on. Like leadership style is passed on from generation to generation from our family. And we're not even quite aware of it because it's so subconscious, so automatic. Oh, my mom did this. They say, we default to how our mom is or how our dad is, and it's very true. And the only way to shift that is for the person being willing to take responsibility, like, hey, I don't like how my mom is treating me, or, I don't like how she's talking to me. I'm going to have a conversation with my mom, and it's going to be confronting and uncomfortable, and hopefully it'll go differently. So that's taking responsibility. It's like when it's going to be uncomfortable and it would be easier just to say nothing, being a leader is saying the uncomfortable thing and doing it anyway.
So leadership kind of can start from the family first.
Yeah.
And so I think we mentioned about mindset. Can you talk a bit about mindset, how a mindset can evolve and change and that impact the decision making?
Yeah, so mindset is all about the perspective that you see life through. If you think about putting a pair of glasses on that has green lenses, you're going to see the world through the green lenses, right? And mindset is all about, so the ironic thing about mindset is that you get to pick your mindset. So if you believe you're not enough, you're going to see life through the I'm not enough. Or, I'm weird. We have all these family weird dynamics like I'm left out or I don't want to be left out. And then we kind of end up seeing the world through these lenses. And mindset, creating a mindset shift really creates a transformation in how you not only you see yourself, but how you interact with the people in your life. So in switching your mindset to, let's say, oh, my family is a burden, or like, my family doesn't like me, why do I even bother, to I want to be connected to my family. Like, you're going to take different actions from that mindset than from a disempowering mindset. A disempowering mindset will only get you the results that you don't want, and an empowering mindset will move you towards the things that you do want. And your brain doesn't actually know the difference between a disempowered or empowered mindset. So if you're running away from something, you're going to get the same thing. You're going to run towards that thing that you're running away from. And if you're running towards what you want, you're going to get what you want. And I think people often confuse, think it's the same. Like, okay, I'm running away from what I don't want, so I'm hopefully running towards what I do want. But actually, when you run away from fear or anything that you're avoiding, you're going to get more of that. And when you're running towards what you do want, which is like maybe being closer with your family, being more connection, and you move towards that, you're going to get more of that.
I wonder what it does to our mind that we spend so much time on the phone. And also, wherever we go, there's a lot of chaos happening, news and all these things. So I wonder how mindset works. How mindset change from one place to another and make a decision.
Yeah, it definitely takes a lot of patience and awareness to start to be able to shift your mindset. When you're not aware of the language and the speaking that's going, we have someone talking in our brain all the time. Some of us have multiple voices talking in our head, and they can fluctuate between empowered or disempowered, or our 6-year-old version, or our 10-year-old version. And it takes a lot of awareness and practice to start noticing it. The first thing that I started to do when I started to go into that inner journey, I started writing. Writing to me felt like I could write down my thoughts. I don't even know how many thoughts we think in a day. It probably statistically at least 100,000. And we're not conscious of what our predominant thoughts are. So if someone's looking to shift their mindset and they want to start really small, I would say start with writing. What are the beliefs that you have about yourself? Write down all the I am statements that you have. I am not enough, or I'm ugly, or I'm fat, or I'm, whatever it might be. And start to write those down, because those are how you'll start becoming aware of what your thoughts are. And that's the first step to starting to shift your mindset, because if you're not aware of it, then it's just running in the background like automatic. Before I became a coach, I knew a few years before that I already wanted to be a coach, because I wanted to help people reach their full potential. And coaching and leadership are very synonymous. A good leader is also a coach, because they can invoke greatness out of others. I think that's what really makes a good leader, is when you can pull someone's best out of themselves without telling them what to do, but supporting them to find their own answers. So when I started deciding that I wanted to be a coach and become a leader and do that thing, I had a calling within. And I think at various points in our lives, we all feel a calling, to go do something. And often it's ignored. And sometimes we listen and we go on some adventure, but I think life is all about those callings. And it takes leadership to actually follow those callings. So I found coaching was my calling. And in starting to develop my own leadership skills, I was pretty insecure 5 10 years ago, like I was shy, I was like insecure about the way I looked, didn't feel like I was smart enough, I felt like there was something wrong with me, I was weird, all the things that I think we human experience. But part of what taking leadership is all about is about starting to fully own yourself authentically, finding, even though you fear stepping into it anyway. Have you ever like done something that you were scared of, and then after you did it, you were like, you felt great after? So I think leadership is all about like, whatever the fear is, like maybe you're scared to go on a date, maybe you're like, scared to go to that interview because you don't think you're qualified. I think leadership starts in those like small steps where, you're just willing and courageous and brave enough to step into the fear anyway. And people can do that in their everyday life. Like I have to do that in my day-to-day life all the time, like I'm scared to have a conversation with my boyfriend, because I'm, maybe it's gonna hurt his feelings, or scared to have a conversation with my mom because she might say no. So it's all about taking those like small steps, because that starts to build up your confidence also. There's something internally when you get called that when you start moving forward to it, that builds your self-trust and self-belief. And I think those are also big parts of leadership as well, is like that self-trust, self-belief, and overall into the bigger confidence. And I think in our society nowadays, we have like this negative connotation with confidence. We think it's like arrogance, but actually confidence is just being comfortable in your own skin. It's not about thinking you're better than anyone else. It's just being fully grounded in who you are and acknowledging your strengths and your weaknesses and being with all of it.
So, how can we fill up the gap of acceptance? You have clarity and you accept each other.
Mm-hmm. I think part of accepting each other is knowing that we're so alike. We all have fears. Well, they're different fears, but we're all so similar. We're all having this human experience where we're going through similar things. Like people at the top still are afraid of being rejected. Like, divorce is still scary for them as well. And just kind of understanding like that we're all similar kind of starts to break away the separation that we have between each other. I think also really listening and truly understanding people is part of like what can break up people's differences also, whether it's multiracial, multicultural, like understanding where people are, like, if someone is, and understanding that you don't need to fix that person's problem either. Like just you being there and listening is already enough to like start breaking that separation.
How can a person, individual person, ordinary person go on with their life and do positive changes in their own small community? How can a person start with a small leadership in their community?
I think what we can do in small communities is make sure to empower each other no matter what's happening, because more empowered people will create a more empowered world. And you can see this in small effect at companies, like a company can go through a hard thing, but if the leadership is empowered and they're like optimistic about the vision of the company and they keep going, then everyone else is going to be the same. The employees are going to be the same. So I think part of it is not, bad news is going to be, present all the time, but it's really about you, taking control of that mindset again and seeing all that is already great in the world. Like we live in a world, there's a lot of scary stuff going on, but look we're here, we have this like beautiful space, and just like, I know this is so cliche, but gratitude. Gratitude is like the antidote to like suffering, because when you have gratitude, you can see everything that is already right with the world. And it's so easy from our like reptilian brains to think about everything that is wrong. But actually, if we just start thinking about everything that is right, just as a daily practice or with our team or in our communities, like that can create a bigger shift and create a trickle effect everywhere we go.
So, can you give 5 steps to become a good leader?
5 steps to become a good leader. Well, take responsibility where you can. Like, wherever you can take some responsibility, whether it's like, it could be something small as like, if you're into the environment, take that little bag with you so you don't have any waste. So take responsibility where you can. Identify problems. Like, don't just ignore the problem. Like, don't sweep it under the rug just because it's easier to, not look at it. Actually face the thing that is, right in front of you. Face the fear. You know, whatever fear it is, whether it's like you're afraid of going on a date, whether it's afraid of having the tough conversation, like face the fear. Find your authentic leader style. Like, find what drives you internally, find what you're good at, find your weaknesses, and just find your authentic self. And that just makes a good leader. You know, you can feel when someone is authentic, and that almost gives the other person that you're with and you're interacting with permission to be authentic as well. And then I think the fifth one would just be like that gratitude, like be in appreciation of everything that you already have, because people can feel that as well. Like, people don't remember what you do or what you did. They actually remember how you made them feel. And I think great leaders make you feel like a great leader can make you feel like you could do anything. Like, if I think of Elon Musk, like, he's made so many big changes in the world, and I feel if one person can do that, and he's a genius and I'm not a genius, but if he can do...
But everyone has the potential.
Everyone has the potential, and he is a strong believer also that any ordinary person can become extraordinary. So I think if you can support others to become extraordinary as well, that's a great leader. Maybe that was 6. So.
Yeah, I like that part, because it could be someone who in their life where they are, in the time in their life where the surrounding where they are, that's how they grew up. So it's going to be challenging for someone who grew up in a difficult, neighborhood. But someone who grew up in a way that you have the possibility to do anything, that you see the light out there. But someone who's inside this small cave, then it's really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But someone who could come out, or someone in that neighborhood could shine a light and give example, then there's a possibility to have another, person to shine the light in the community.
Yeah, if you can be the light for someone and be like that beacon and give them some hope like that, that starts to transform not only your life, because it feels, ironically, it feels good to help people. Like, we all want to help people, we all want to support people, we all want to make an impact. And sometimes we need to fill up our own cups to know that we can fill it up so much that it spills over to other people. And I think sometimes we think it's selfish to fill up our own cup, and then we get depleted. And that's when we start to operate from like that depleted, selfish place. Oprah Winfrey talks about this a lot. She's like, your only job is to fill up your own cup so it can overflow and spill onto others. And I think sometimes we forget that, we need to fill up our own cup. And then we get depleted, and then we become like stingy, and
yes,
then that has a trickle effect as well.
So good leaders should be selfless as well, maybe.
Selfless and a little selfish too. Take care of yourself. Like, I was just listening to this podcast where this woman, Marie Forleo, she had not gone on a vacation with her husband or significant other because she was a workaholic for 7 years. And what she found when she scaled back a little bit and started taking time for herself was that her creativity boosted, and that she was actually more productive. So sometimes we think we need to like suffer and like work really hard, and sometimes we do. There's always that phase in our career that we need to work really hard to get the rocket off the ground. But once it's off the ground, we need to be able to switch and adjust to finding that sweet spot.